Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So, here's a little known fact. Osiris didn't actually approve of the Cult of Osiris. Yeah, that one might be a little bit odd, but it certainly helps to explain Osiris's reaction, or lack thereof, to the disappearance of another character that's been gone from Destiny since the Season of Arrivals. OG Destiny 1 players might remember Brother Vance, the vendor for Trials of Osiris, who was turned into a walking meme by the time of the Curse of Osiris DLC in Destiny 2. Today we're going to discuss what happened to Vance, but we're also going to take a look at one of the most brutal takedowns in Destiny lore. Yeah, it's not so terrible, it's not How's Your Sister, but it's still pretty bad. Like, oof, just ouch. So, where do we start to tell Vance's story? Well, it all really starts with the formation of the Cult of Osiris. The Osirian cult has some really, really messy lore, as does the whole of the Curse of Osiris era, to be completely honest. But I think the big thing to take away from their existence is that sensationalism has its dangers. Let's start with the absolute basics. Osiris was concerned with the powers of the Vex, and was continuously trying to convince the Speaker of his concerns. The Speaker's unwillingness to actually, well, speak on the matter, or act on the matter for that matter, led Osiris to the decision that he should publish his findings on the Vex, so that the whole of the Last City might be able to see what he saw, to know what he knew. Unfortunately, Osiris wasn't exactly very perceptive of the ramifications that this would have politically and, well, in terms of what the general populace would do. In the short term, people absolutely flooded to try and read his findings. Unfortunately, given the somewhat rabid following that Osiris had, people started to refer to them as prophecies. Copies of them kept on getting sold for more and more extravagant prices. There's a panel in the Exile of Osiris comic, I believe it's called, from way back when, that literally shows someone holding it up and others being like, nah, I'll pay this much glimmer. It's quite a time. However, the real unfortunate knock-on effect of all this is the political fallout. Yeah, people were a little bit hysterical, and yes, Osiris definitely spread some word about the Vex, but the reality is also this. He unintentionally created a cult following. And that cult following was a huge political threat to the Speaker. Not only was it something that threatened the unified rule of the city, but it would split them in terms of their beliefs about the Tower and the Guardians for years to come. The culmination of this chaos would lead to Osiris's time of so-called exile, a time which he embraced. Much as it might have been hard for some to conceive of, Osiris was not truly a political animal, but he was a pragmatist, and he was someone who believed in taking action. He believed that his efforts fighting the Vex might be crucial to humanity's survival, and so he didn't really care about the brand of exile that some might have laid upon him. And at that moment, he decided to venture forth into the wilds. Specifically, he ventured towards Mercury. Needless to say, in the time after the Speaker's death, Osiris would return to the Lost City in the time of Destiny 2, but in those times before, you would potentially have found him wandering the system alone. This time of isolation only added to the mystery surrounding him. Whilst he did nothing to stop the mysteries that others stoked, it's clear that Osiris wasn't keen to involve himself in such matters either. One key example of this can be seen when he first met those that would call themselves his disciples, his cult. Osiris had gone to Mercury all those years ago, and the cult eventually found him and followed him, setting up the lighthouse in the Caloris Spires. Osiris's first interaction with these fanatics on Mercury is a mixed affair, to say the least. The exchange that took place on the day when they found him was between himself and Sister Feora, one of the non-Guardian acolytes that was leading the group. The record of that moment reads as follows. "Curious," Osiris muttered to himself, running his fingers through the dry and dusty etchings inside the spire on Mercury. "Sagira, record this. I want to cross-reference this pattern with any other constructs we came across." "Gladly. I was looking for the inspiration for a remodel anyway." "I'm in no mood for humor today, Sagira." "So, it's just like any other day." Osiris ignores his ghost, fixated on the circular metal structure embedded into the ceiling above him. He stares intently, almost through it, pondering its function. The baguettes are apparent to him, a cause for concern. Dropship approaching, Osiris. Cabal? I wish. Your devotees. Osiris shields his eyes from the marigold sand whirled up by the landing shuttle as he approaches, his frustration already mounting. Turn back, fools! He yells before the doors could fully open. Teacher, we're here to support your efforts. A woman dressed in an ornately patterned cloak appeals. My efforts are none of your concern. Now go. Osiris's dismissal does nothing to dissuade them. They look to the woman for guidance as Osiris departs. She advances, and the group moves in lockstep. Like scolded dogs, they follow him back toward the spire. Persistent bunch, Sagira scoffs. I've noticed. Osiris turns to address them, catching them off guard. I don't know what you hope to accomplish, but my work does not require zealots. We seek only to help. The fashion in which you were ousted from the Vanguard. They were wrong to chastise you. They will come to regret their decision, she says with the conviction of solemn promise. Is that a threat? They are the architects of their own destruction. You misunderstand the events that transpired. I was not exiled, I chose to leave. There is no acrimony with the Vanguard. Go back to your lives, Osiris says as firmly and calmly as he can muster. I'm afraid that's impossible, now that we have read your teachings. My research is not gospel, it's science. It's truth. Osiris considers this. Truth seems subjective these days, Osiris says, finally observing his entourage for the first time. Among them, a small group of men and women, stand two wayward guardians, warlocks it appears, and a child. Their forlorn faces resonate with him. Castaways and believers. The weeks since his departure from the city have worn on him. He was used to working alone, knowing he could fall back to the city's resources should he need them. Now, adrift in the expanse of purpose, he finds himself longing for a place he could return to. A sanctuary. I have no intention of staying here. There are many constructs like this. They all require my attention. We will follow. No, you won't. I need to move quickly without burden or baggage. Osiris pauses. The irony in casting these people away is not lost on him. But I can offer this. Stay here. Watch over this place. I want to know everything you can discover about it. Should anything occur, I will return. We are at your service, she says, relieved, and bows to Osiris. He grits his teeth. Unpack the ship, she beckons to the group. Yes, Sister Feora, one of the taller men replies. If you find yourself lost in the darkness, we will be your lighthouse. Osiris nods, repressing a tinge of discomfort. He looks up to the spire. And so, the Assyrian cult was born. A group of followers, some amongst them merely civilians, some guardians, some even children. Slowly they would begin to grow within the Caloris spires on Mercury. Sister Feora was and is to this day a major member of the cult, and is often suspected to be its leader. However, there were many followers and acolytes that they gained over the years. Not least amongst them was a prodigy of sorts known as Brother Vance. Whilst Vance was blind, there were other notable things that he could perceive. In particular, Vance began to realize that he was somehow in tune with the Caloris spire. It resonated with a tonal hum whenever someone near it died. This was typically something he discovered because of the deaths of guardians. These tones became the object of Vance's study. He believed that the Caloris spire was an instrument of sorts and that he might be able to decipher its code if he listened closely enough. For these reasons, the cult began to understand this practice more and more, and they set up the arena of crucible matchmaking known as the Trials of Osiris, something very much off the grid from the main crucible as it began. As Guardians died in the crucible, Brother Vance continued to study, listening to the tones that were left by their deaths. As Vance continued his studies, he would discover that the notes and tones of Guardians were different if the death was a final death, something that he discovered at the onset of the Red War. He also assembled a Vex curiosity of sorts by the time of the Season of Arrivals known as the Infinite Simulacrum, a device created, if all the implications from the lore are correct, to emulate the purpose of the Infinite Forest and its many simulations. Eventually, Brother Vance would take this device into the Infinite Forest at the end of the Season of Arrivals and would activate it. The strangest of things would happen here, as hundreds of golden echoes of Vance would appear around him. Needless to say, we've seen something like this before, as it perfectly matches the description of Osiris's echoes. We see those in the Curse of Osiris campaign. They are literally just like that. Identical copies of the same Guardian, all of them silhouetted in gold. The source of this peculiar power was never confirmed, but I don't know if it's quite linked to the Simulacrum, partly because of the fact that Osiris has been shown in the lore to wield this particular power in the defense of the city at the Battle of the Six Fronts. Regardless, the Simulacrum appears to be capable of this power as well, or at least something close to it. It's not clear if this is the original source of such power, if it's something that is merely similar to it, or if it's something that is adjacent. Either way, this isn't the strangest thing that happens. The strangest thing is this. When the copies of Vance begin to appear, Vance is lifted up by them in an uplifting and quite joyous moment from his perspective. He then begins to sing. I wish I could tell you that I'm lying here, and that I'm just kidding, but the song he starts singing is literally Hope from the Future. Seriously, I'm not making that up. Go ahead and look up Vance Passeri. The only reason I know that is because when you sit down and actually have Brother Vance in that lore tab in Vance Passeri, he says the words, "Some hope for," and another copy of him finishes by saying the line, "The future," aka "Some hope for the future." Literally the first lyrics in the song. Paul McCartney's work lives on, even though we can never play it on the channel because copyright is fun. Haha, yeah, we're not doing that. Also, I know that's not exactly everyone's favorite song. That's not even the really confusing part of it though, because as this other copy of Vance sings the other part in his voice, suddenly the OG Vance then reaches out and attacks that copy. I don't know why this is, but the description of the lore tab states that whatever the thing was wearing his cloak, and that when Vance moved to strangle it, its form twisted into something cold and sharp in his hands. Even as it threw Vance on his back, he was able to reach up to its face, reach beneath its blindfold, and crush its eyes under his thumbs. The last line of that lore entry in that particular moment seems to state that Vance was pleased with that particular development, recounting how unfortunate it is that whatever the weird doppelganger was still had eyes. The contrasting description there makes me think that Vance doesn't have eyes at all anymore, and that may be the reason why he wears the blindfold. Also, it makes me ask a dozen other questions about what in the world that thing might be. Is it just one of the echoes? Maybe, sure. But then why the description of its form as twisted and turning cold and sharp? And why does it still have eyes? Why was it wearing a blindfold over them? Is Vance in this moment discovering to use stasis somehow? Hence why it says that the form was suddenly cold and sharp? Why does this one copy of him have his voice and his robes, but then also a pair of eyes that he's missing? There are 10,000 other questions this weird lore entry raises, but the one thing it makes very clear is that the Infinite Forest sealed itself just before this moment. If we ever do return to Mercury, it's likely that we'll discover a little bit more about what's happening with Brother Vance as the season goes on. And there is a little bit more to talk about when it comes to that front, because rediscovering Vance is something that the lore has done recently. This is a topic raised in the Targeted Redaction Weapon. It's a new taken weapon from the Season of the Deep. In this lore entry, Saint 14 and Osiris can be found in Neomuna, talking about the odds of finding other survivors from the planets that were abducted by the Witness. It reads as follows. The neon-saturated skyline of Neomuna pops bright against the starry night sky. On a rooftop overlooking an empty tree-lined plaza, Saint and Osiris sit in contemplative silence. They are making time for one another in the margins of their lives, pushing responsibilities aside as much as they can. So, is she doing any better? Osiris asks, breaking several minutes of peaceful silence. Sloane, he clarifies. Every day is small progress, Saint explains, and even small progress is something to be proud of. Osiris nods, watching the glittering lights in the distance. It's nothing short of a miracle that she survived all that time on Titan. A portion of Ashamir also seems to have survived his dive into the Pyramidion. Don't lose hope in the darkness, he says, joining his hand with Saint's. Yes, perhaps there is even hope for Brother Vance, Saint offers. Osiris stares at him in prolonged silence. Who? Saint coughs and politely changes the topic. Ouch. Again, it's not quite how's your sister, but ouch. Oh. If Vance was a fly on the wall in that particular moment, I imagine he would have died. For those of you who don't know, Vance is a massive fanboy of Osiris, more so than your typical Osirian cult members. And I think this is also indicative of a not exactly positive trait that is classic to Osiris. He has actually met Vance before, but yeah, he totally does not remember him. Again, it's a very mixed interaction at best, that one meeting. He basically scolded Brother Vance for his research into the tonal notes when Guardians died that were produced by the Spire, and then at the very end, when he did actually get one message from the Queen of the Reef that Vance promised to deliver to him, he said, "Oh, good job, you did great on that particular thing." And Brother Vance walks away from that particular conversation feeling great, despite having been scolded by Osiris. To say that he has this man wrapped around his finger and doesn't even know it is, I mean, it's really unfortunately true. But then again, this is the reality of a fanatic, I suppose. For Osiris, though, he doesn't remember Vance, and I think that makes sense because, I mean, there are just bigger things going on for Osiris. He's contemplating the nature of darkness and light and the bigger things of the universe and chasing the Witness across the solar system to make sure that it doesn't claim the Veil. Okay, well, chasing Callus and the Shadow Legion, but you know what I mean. He's trying to make sure that the whole world doesn't fall apart. He doesn't have time to remember some guy. So, yeah, it does actually make a little bit of sense that Osiris might be a little bit more pressed and might remember the research of the person who had actually researched the thing more than the researcher themselves. But again, this is very characteristic of old Osiris, to be either so cold and detached from people, or to be so obsessed with the bigger picture that he could actually forget who Vance is. Granted, ever since he lost his light, I think he's gotten a lot better at all of this, but even through those strangely positive changes that have come out of that tragedy, it doesn't change the fact that at some point in the future, his baggage from the past is going to come back to haunt him, I think. And Vance is part of that baggage, even if Osiris doesn't quite know it. If we should find Brother Vance again in the future, expect it to be a very strange moment. We may yet have to venture into the Infinite Forest once more, and if we do, there's a fleeting chance that we might rediscover Vance and finally learn what happened to him within its many forking branches. With all that being said, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, and let me know what you think is going to happen with Brother Vance in the future. If you have any thoughts of your own, the comment section is open for you. And of course, if you want more Destiny content, go ahead and hit subscribe, and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. I'm going to GCX, and that means that I'm going to be producing just a little bit less content than usual, but I'm going to make sure that we have stuff scheduled over the next few days. Also, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but I want to see if one of the next videos I can publish is actually going to be my million view video. Or, sorry, not million view video. God, that ship has sailed. Million subscriber video. Yeah, it's been a long time, and that ship has also sailed a while ago, with something like 30,000 subscribers over the mark, but I never got around to doing it in Lightfall, and that's when I had the Rona, so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, ahead of GCX. And I'm gonna use it to talk about things that I want to talk about, because I want to spread some love. I want to share some things that I think are really cool. And I think a video that supposedly is all about celebrating me is no better time to do it than that. So yeah, we're gonna do it then. Look out for that on the channel. In the meantime though, as per usual, know that your viewership as always has been quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Por audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.